Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, Vantas are back on the Card Fight Vanguard deck profiles. If you enjoyed them, like, subscribe, and let's move on, shall we? This time we're covering Dark States, Transrotor. So, Transrouter. If you don't know who Transrouter was, he was that one grade 3 that none of us really saw coming for set 7, where Bushy was like, fuck it, let's give them a new main grade 3. I have been complaining for a while that Bushy should be giving us more main grade 3s if they're not going to get different ride lines, and Bushy listened, and not only that, this deck's actually good. You know, no, I'm not even joking with you. Like, if you know what you're doing, this deck is terrifying because there is a way to get 90 something on first grade 3 turn, and on like everything, or not everything, but like all your swings would be over 90. So yeah, yeah, so let's go and get this started, shall we? Maybe you can see what the fuck I'm talking about. First up, we have our starter, and one with Profound Mercy, Chaos. So Chaos is a grade 0 boost by Shields is K base, Autumn Road upon 1 second draw card. Standard starter, no special about it, it's just a free draw. You can really run any starter in this place because none of the ride line, especially the one I'm going with, because you know Transrotor doesn't have an actual ride line, needs a specific grade 0, so you can really make this any starter you want. I just chose Chaos because, I don't know, I feel like out of all of the starters, this was the one that fit Transrotor the most, so I was like, fuck it, sure. So yeah, one with Profound Mercy. Also, it's a sign that if you want Mercy, better start begging now, because once we get to grade 3, I ain't fucking holding back. So, Chaos. They really can be any starter, but I like to do this one just for a bit. Then we have our Overtrigger and Hades Dragon Deity of Resentment, Gale Mage Held. The dull penis shall pass. Hey, if you know what I'm referencing, good on you. You get 100 sub points. There is no monetary value to that, and frankly, I don't even know how to give 100 sub points, but in my eyes, you know what? In my eyes, you gain my respect if you know what I'm referencing. So anyways, Great Zero Boost, 50k shield, 5k power. Over Trigger, you may have one check in your deck, reveals trigger, middle card, draw a card, choose one reads, skip something for the turn, and if you revealed it during your drive check, activate additional effect, which is you get during your turn all your Vanguards get plus 10k and a crit until the end of this fight. So, that ability is powerful. How often do I sack the Overtrigger nowadays? Very rarely. Of course, I sack Blessed Favor 24/7 because apparently Leonore just loves to do that with me. But Gale Mage Held over here honestly is an amazing Overtrigger. It was I think it was one of the first 2 I sacked, but it was either that or the Drag Veda one. But I like Gale Mage Held a lot because that 10k extra crit puts a lot more pressure on the Vanguard, regardless of what the deck is. And you definitely don't need the 1 million. This deck has power handled on its own scale. You just need the pressure on Van. So yeah, Gale Mage Held is really nice to have because on those turns where your Vanguard's not hitting for heavy pressure, with the, the big ass numbers that exceed into the 90s, getting that extra crit on it is pretty nice too. So all around, good Overtrigger I like to have as a one of, and I also just like his head. I don't know why I like this. Then we have our normal triggers. First up, 3 fronts in Huckle Hassle, grade 0, or Hustle, grade 0 boost, and get shield, 5k power. Okay, we all know why I'm not running the Diablos front, and I feel like I have to constantly say this because I'm afraid, like, at some point someone's gonna say, oh, you don't like Diablos. No. Diablos is, like, it's either my favorite or it's one of my top 2 favorite decks in Dark States. So it's not that I don't like Diablos, it's just the fact that I don't like running archetypal cards on a non-archetypal deck unless, like, every archetype is getting mixed into it. That is my stance on archetype mixing. It's either everyone gets involved or no one gets involved, unless it's like a mixture of 2 specific ones. If it's a mixture of only 2, then I'm fine with it, but otherwise, everyone has to be involved or no one's involved. So yeah, I mean, the ride line here gets the exception because obviously, we don't have that many versatile ride line. Well, we have a versatile grade 1, but we don't have a versatile grade 2. So yeah, 3 of Huckle Hassle. I like having the front here. Also, I just have better luck with her than I have Natalie. Like, if the shield... Like, because I know a lot of people are going to say, like, oh, shield is more important than personal playstyle. 1, no, it is not. Every deck I have on this channel is a testament to that statement. And 2, I have more luck with Hustle than I have with Diablo. So, yeah, I'd rather run her over the other front. Then we have our 4 crits and Flinty Slasher, followed by 4 more crits, and Steam Deviate Dragon, all the way rear at the end battle booster, put it to Soul, choose remix plus 2 for the turn. Okay, you never run it for that 2k. That does not make a difference, especially when your things are hitting for the 90s. What you run it for is it's a grade 0 to Soul. If you don't know what Transrotor does, he involves having a bunch of grade 0s in Soul. That's why this is here. And you want to know what the funny thing is too? After so long, and I said that I would never use these cards, this is the reason I won a game, and I feel so happy that I finally got to prove that point. So, 4 of Steam Deviate, 8 crits in total, 3 front for the pressure. You do not need draws, because I promise you will deck yourself out very quickly, and honestly, this deck has more pressure than the defense it needs. As they say, a good offense is a good defense, so yeah, I go with it. And then we have our 4 heals in Steam Scar and Melanie Draw, grade 0 boosted and get shield, 5k power. Okay, standard here, and let's talk about it. I don't really like the effect heals. I think I made that pretty clear at this point because they're a little bit too situational. Even the decks that I think they work best against, I still wouldn't run them to save my life because, to be frank with you, they wouldn't save my life. They would screw me over half the time I would have if I had them in those games, they would have screwed me over half the time I had them. Just saying. So, like, I'd rather have normal heals that are consistent and that I can make a game plan with that unless my opponent starts trigger sacking, it won't change anything, compared to the heals where if I made a miscalculation somewhere or if my opponent just willingly chooses not to use a skill, then I am screwing myself by having that shield less. So, I'd rather have the consistent 15 than the 50-50 chance on the 25. So, for Mana Joe, if you want to run the effect heals, go ahead, but I don't like having it. Then we have our 4 PGs and Repelled Malice Dragon was our first grade 1. Grade 1 boost, 6k power, 0 shield. Continuous Sentinel, you may have up to 4 summons in the deck, and auto was put on guard circle. Choose one of your units, it can up into battle, and if your hand is turned, mark cards, grab him and discard it. Standard PG, not special about it with. Basically, what that means is this and only card is in your hand when you place it on guard circle. You don't have to discard, and that's really great, especially in this deck where you don't run draws, because that means you can be as aggressive as you want in the early game, which works out if you're going first and you push your opponent to 5 damage before they even get to grade 3, or you beat them before they get to grade 3, because you can do that in this deck. And having that PGs in case they survive and push back on you is really nice, because that means, you know, your low hand can turn into an advantage, because that means you still went on the big offense and you still have the PG to drop. Now, I'm only bringing this up because someone brought this up in a comment in an earlier video of last week, where why don't I run the Blitz PG? For those of you that play competitive, I'm not going to tell you otherwise. The Blitz PG is good. Because, you know, a lot of decks do, or not a lot of decks, but like good decks, or I don't want to say good decks because there are good decks that don't have this, but you know, you all know what I'm trying to say here. Like a lot of decks that are meta-wise have triple drive, specifically triple drive and not just game 1 drive, and the Blitz PG works against those. My reasoning for not winning the Blitz PG is because 1, I'm not a competitive player. If at any point you thought I was a competitive player, you are wrong as hell. Not competitive at all. I play for fun and that's it. But also the reason why I don't use the Blitz PGs is because those are not for me. I'd rather have this free skill right here where it activates when I'm at 2 or when I have this only with a card in my hand, compared to the Blitz PG where it's only free if my opponent is at grade 3. Or not grade 3, but has triple drive inherently. And I don't want that to be the case. Because if I'm reliant on that, then that means that I cannot, you know, most of the time I have to drop those hand cards compared to Repel Malice, where I can at least save myself. And not to mention the fact, too, that I normally call PGs a lot, sometimes for finishing moves, and sometimes just to do a bit in the early game, which ends up winning me the game sometimes. So, like, having more normal unit PGs is better for me. If you want to run the Blitz PG, go ahead. There's nothing wrong with it, especially if you're playing competitive. I do suggest you run it, because that's the only bit of competitive bias I can give you, and a little bit here and there of other decks. But I prefer casual. The PG means freaking nothing to me. So, yeah, for Repelled Malice. Again, Blitz PG is fine, but this works better for my playstyle. Then we have our other grade ones. First up, we have 4 copies of Friend of the Netherworld Ling. At this point, I think she's become a straight-up staple in all of my Dark States, just because she's been proving so useful. So, grade 1 boost 5k shields is AK base. Auto when she's placed on rear guard with the top 2. Choose a card from among them, put it to soul, and put the rest to bottom of deck. Okay, to those of you that don't think this is useful, here is the luck I discovered with Ling before I started using her in this deck. Whenever I would use her skill, the top 2, one of them at least would always be a trigger, most likely a heal, and there would be a 50-50 chance the other one's a crit, specifically Steam Deviate. Now you can see why she's in here. It's always the second I place her, it's a guaranteed trigger to soul, and I need every grade 0 I can get for Transrotor. She is straight up perfect for me in this deck. She guaranteedly gets me a good soul charge, and she does it for free. 4 of Ling, amazing card, hell yeah. And then we have 4 copies of another amazing card, and the reason why this deck can hit 90, and that is Brainwash Swirler. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, AK base, auto rear when it's placed on rear, soul charge 1, and auto rear when a card is put into your soul by soul charge. If your Vanguard is a grade 3 grade, it gets +5 for the turn, 10k if it's soul charge 2. Now, for those of you wondering, it has to be the soul charge icon, so it doesn't work for Ling where she says put a card to soul. It has to be an active soul charge skill, but that's still really good, because if you don't know what Transrotor does, and I'm giving more detail about him as we go along, he soul charges 6 at the same time, so that's a free 30 to this boy. And he also gives +10 to the whole board. So he's getting a free 40 off of just Transrotor. And I know a lot of you, or I don't know if a lot of you saw this game or not, but that game I had with Transrotor versus, I think, Barrow, I didn't do it to its full effect because there was no reason to, and it would, well, I mean, it wouldn't have killed me, but there was no reason to do it to its full effect. Let's just say this. That was the game where I could actively hit 90 on screen. Maybe even 100 because of what I was doing. Yeah. This deck hits crazy numbers the second you get to grade 3. 90 to 100 on first grade 3 turn without even try-harding. 4 Brainwash Swirler. The second this thing comes down, this is your opponent's worst enemy, and they will have a sniper rifle aimed at it at all times and be ready to nuke it with an AK-47. That was 3 different weapons all at once, but you get my point. So, for a Brainwash Swirler, good grade 1, amazing card. Your opponent will hate this thing to its existence. So, 4 make sure it kills them. Then we have 4 copies of Inhale Pit. This is very useful for coming back for comeback abilities. So grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, act rearguard once per turn, soul blast 1 grade 1 or greater card. Okay, so I was right on this. Because the way someone played it before, when I first saw this, is it was soul blast specifically, grade 1s, any amount. So now that I know, by the way, this is pulled from the fandom, so the fandom might be the one that's wrong here. But Soul Blast 1 grade 1 or greater, so it can be a grade 1, 2, 3. Choose, or grade 4 for some reason. Choose 2 grade 0s from your drop and put them to Soul. Yeah, that's useful. It gets more grade 0s into Soul, you don't have to deck yourself out from it, and that's really amazing. Like, don't get me wrong, I love these two, but they're both mandatory Soul charges because, you know, they're free and they're not made clauses, so they will deck you out slowly but surely. I mean, Brainwash will probably kill him long before then, but yeah, worry about the deck out. But Inhale Pit doesn't deck you out. As long as you have a grade 1 or greater in Soul, she will get you 2 more Soul, and that's amazing to have. And I like having her, and the moon in the background obviously makes me like her even more. Just a good card for setup, and if you have 3 of them, that guarantees Transrotor going off. So 4 of Inhale Pit, just an amazing grade 1 that makes sure that you don't die doing your deck's main gimmick. Then we have our last grade 1 in the grade 1 of the ride line, that is Deep Sonicer. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto when it's placed on Vanguard, soul charge 1, and continues rear guard during turn if your soul has 10 or more cards, this unit gets plus 10. Okay. There are 2 arguments here for the other ride line, one of them being not Matt, what was the grade 1's name? I'm trying to remember, Steve, Bad Steve. One of them being Bad Steve, the other one being the pony that's like in its soul, bind it, soul charge 2. Okay, reason why it's Deep Sonicer. 1. It's just a free soul charge. You all know what the grade 2 is because that's the only generic grade 2 ride line we have. But the reason why it's not Steve is because I don't want to just call the starter out from Soul and that's the grade 0 I get to Soul for the grade 2 skill. I want it to be a grade 0 that I have from hand. So now if I don't have a grade 0 from hand, it sucks for me. But like, I'd rather increases my grade 0s in Soul. Like, you guys get the point. Like, that's why it's not Bad Steve here, because I get the same Soul charge regardless. The only difference is, one, I'm giving them a nuke target to shut me down with, and I'm getting a booster that doesn't really make a difference, because most of the time when I play against people, they take the Vanguard unless they're really confident that I'm going to pull a crit. So, you know, that's the case. And then the reason why I'm not running the pony is because Soul Charge 2 will kill me. Like, that's very close. This deck plays down to the wire. Like, the amount of times I've seen this deck gone down to 1 deck card, I ain't taking that chance. Like, pony, not with pony. But yeah, so Deep Sonicer being the only option I have left, obviously getting that free Soul Charge, and then the rear guard skill is never going to go off because there's absolutely no way to call this from Soul, and there's no I mean, there is a reason to, but there's absolutely no way you're calling this from Soul in this deck. So, one of in the ride deck, but if you manage to call that from Soul, good for you. He's an 18k swinger, or most likely 28 with Transrotor, so one of Deep Sonicer. Then we have our grade 2s. 3 copies of Ultrasound Shiri. I know there's an English art of her, and I literally just did the trial deck unboxing of Dragold for it, but the English art was not on the fandom when I made this deck, so yeah. Anyways, grade 2 and stuff, 5k shield, 10k base, auto when you place it on rear guard from hand. By counter blasting, well, look at the top 3, choose a card from among them, put it to your soul, shuffle your deck, and if your soul's from a different grade, draw a card. Okay, that is possible. It is. It's just rare because that would involve you soul charging your only grade 3, which is a Persona ride, I might add, so it's rare that it will occur, and typically use this to get triggers in Soul anyways, but hey, if you're anything like my friend who freaking called down and it wasn't this deck, it was Powerful Midas that did it, who called down 4 of these, he had 2 in his hand, he played 1, drew another one, called on top of the one he already played, used that skill, I don't know what he drew, but then he called the 3rd one on top of the second one, used its skill, drew the 4th copy of it, called it down, and then drew a PG. I don't fucking know how he did it, but he did. Anyways, and that was in a different deck, obviously, not this one. But our Ultrasound is great, gets selective soul stacking, all for the cost of the counter blast, which, now that I think about it, I think she's the only counter blaster in this deck. Nope, there's one other card that counter blast, but in between those 2, you pretty much have free reign and a possible draw if you have 4 different cards in Soul, or 4 different grades in Soul. All around, I like her a lot. She does do setup, but I do like the other one having the more counter blast party because she gets a guaranteed grade 0 to Soul, so 3 of Ultrasound Shiri. She's still good, she's amazing, but between these 2, I like her more than I like Shiri. Then we have 4 copies of, obviously, my favorite grade 2. I think I've made this very clear about Dark States in general. And that is Selfish Engraver. Grade 2, intercept 5k shield, 10k base, auto rear. When her attack hits, you still charge 1. Oh, this deck doesn't have, I was about to say, wait, I missed a grade 1. No, I didn't. I was trying to think about it for a second. So, Self-Energy Engraver is just a good on-hit soul charge, because, you know, it hits regardless if it's Vanguard or Rear Guard, so they have to guard it, otherwise you get soul charged up the wazoo, and that does something in this deck a lot, especially if I had that 1 grade 1 in here. Oh yeah, the reason why I don't run that 1 grade 1, it's the Direfold doll that, you know, doubles your soul charge amount, or not doubles, but adds an extra soul charge to it. The reason why I don't run is Counterboss, that's why it's not here. But anyways, auto rear, at the end of the battle, this unit attacked, if your soul has 10 or more soul cards, put it to soul, countercharge 1. Great, that is extremely easy to get in this deck. You will most likely have 10 soul before you start doing shit, so being able to get a free counter charge out of it's amazing, and also the on-hit pressure is great as well. I mean, granted, the on-hit pressure also works against you because, you know, it's a forced soul charge, so, you know, if they actually take it, you're slowly deck yourself out, so make sure that unless you really need that soul charge, you're swinging that van and forcing them to drop cards for it. But all around, Self-Energy Engraver is amazing, grade 2. I like it a lot. Free counter charge, free soul charge. What's not to love about it? 4 of. Also, the Snake's Devouring the Moon. Then we have 4 copies of the last grade 2 in the deck, and that is Steady Spiky. I don't know why I like this card's art. I think it just looks cool, like the background and everything. Kind of reminds me of like Transylvania. I see a fucking gargoyle in the background. God damn it, the theme from Gargoyles just started playing. Like, I live again from DuckTales. Anyways, grade 2 and 5k shield, 10k base. Autumn was placed on rear guard from hand. Card boss 1, put a grade 0 card from your hand to soul. Choose a grade 1 from your soul, put it to hand. Great. So straight up, get your deck's main mechanic into soul and fetch a PG out. Or fetch Brainwash. Or fetch Inhale, which I have soul charge a bunch of Inhales at some point. Or fetch Ling. Honestly, like, amazing grade 2. Just straight up swap for something better while also getting your gimmick off. This is how you make good support, Bushy. You actually did good on this one. Like, holy shit, that's amazing. The only downside is being a counter boss. Even though there's not a fucking downside. We have, like, the world's best counter charger up in here. What the fuck? That's not a downside at all. Like, 4 of Steady Spiky. Honestly, amazing. Like, this deck doesn't need counter boss. It's fine that it costs a counter boss. And the fact that it gets a free soul swap and get you a benefit out of it. Fuck it. Like, this is actual support. Why the fuck is this not a double rare? Bet right now, if Transrotor was a great... What rare is Transrotor? If Transrotor was not a common, and it was like a double or triple rare, bet this would be a double or / triple rare too. 4 of Steady Spiky. Fucking amazing. Hell yeah. Then we have our last grade 2, and that's the grade 2 of the ride deck, and that is Diablo's Anger with Chod. Yeah, like I said before, the ride line gets the free pass on being splashable with archetypes because... I have no generic grade 2. Grade 2 is the 5k shield, 10k base. Let's go ahead and read the second ability, which will never go off because even if you could call this from soul, I guarantee you right now there's no way to get into Final Rush. Continues rear guard if you're in Final Rush, gets +5. Like I said before, ain't fucking happening. And then auto when it's placed on Vanguard, put a rear guard to soul, draw a card. Like I said, the easiest way to pull this off is just to use Steve with it and get that guaranteed mat on board or whatever your starter is. But for Richard, especially in this deck where I want to get that many grade 0s and soul as possible, that would essentially just be I call a rear guard to give them a nuke target and actually lose a grade 0 and soul if they nuke it, and I just have a booster for a Vanguard that will most likely be guarded or be taken anyways. So I'd honestly rather just not have Steve as my starter and instead just call grade 0 from soul so I can get more draws out of it, and if they nuke it, so be it. But like, yeah, that's just how at least I didn't lose a grade 0, I guess. So that's how I see it. If you want to run Steve for that consistency, go ahead, but I do prefer Sonica and Richard with this combo just so I actually gain soul instead of just losing it. So 1 of Richard in the ride deck. Just a good grade 2. Gets that free draw. And then our last card in the deck is obviously our main grade 3, who, despite being a common, does a lot in this deck. I mean, maybe that's because of partially Brainwash, but even without Brainwash, this deck still does good. Just Brainwash is like the finishing big one, and that is Demonic Blade of Cutting Sky, Transrotor. Okay, that's a very weird sounding name. Grade 3, 100 Persona, 13k base. Act Van, soul once per turn. By soul blasting 6 grade 0s, you soul charge 6, choose 6 of your units, and it gets +10 for the turn. Great. The amount of times it said 6 in that sentence means I summoned the devil. Actually, no, that's true. His wording has 3 6s in it, so, like, you know, all separated by commas, so, you know, that's funny. Anyways, getting that ability off is, like, it's free soul saver. Because you don't have to pay counter boss. Granted, it's more soul than soul saver, and you do have to. It's a mandatory soul charge 6. That will drop you by deck cards a lot. But that's good because half the time my soul charge 2 triggers off this, so that's already 2 grade 0s back in soul, and then Inhale Pit / the rest of my soul charge will get the rest. But yeah. So think about this real quickly. 4 brainwashes, right? Casually 4 brainwashes. Let's just say they were all placed last turn. You do Transrotor. Soul charge 6 plus 10. That's a total of 48 to each of those brainwashes. Or not plus 48, but they're all at 48. What happens when you swing with 2 brainwashes boosted by each other? That's 96. First grade 3 turn. None of the brainwashes even had to go off that turn. They could just been placed the previous turn. All you need is 2 of them. Yeah. That's the shit this deck gets to. Don't fuck with this deck. Like, I'm telling you right now, if you see this stuff come down, like, if you see any of these cards hit the damage zone at all, or, like, you have an intuition that you know what you're fighting, do not go past 2 damage. Don't go past 1, honestly, because this deck does shit. Like, do not go past 1. If you have to go past 1, go to 2, and that's it. Guard with your life. Keep those PGs ready, because I tell you what, when the game starts getting to grade 3 turns, whoo, game starts going. This deck hits like a truck. You think Bastion hits like a truck? This deck hits like a fucking tank. This deck hits like a nuke going to your face. Like, don't mess with it, okay? That's all I'm gonna say. You ain't outpower him this shit in terms of numbers. You're gonna have to outlast it. 3 of Transrotor in the main deck, 1 of in the ride deck. Hits numbers even when it's the only thing that goes off that turn. Just saying. That's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. Honestly, this deck is terrifying. You would think a common grade 3 with 2 supports that I think are both rares or commons respectively would not be that good. You take Brainwash Swirler and it immediately becomes like good. Like, okay, without Brainwash Swirler, the deck's not that good. It's not bad either, but like, you know, it's a lot harder to kill things because it doesn't have that mass power. But Brainwash brings them to a whole other level of bullshit. The second 2 of them come down, you know things are about to get real. So, don't sleep on this deck. It is deadly, and if Bushy actually decided to keep giving it more support, we might be in trouble. So, I'm ending here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join Discord, follow Twitch, and I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to stand up your vanguards.